Welcome back. This is Sandy with Sandy's Organized Chaos, and today I'm going to be showing you how I made my hydro dipped red, white, and blue with camo bottom tumbler. So let's get to it. Today I will be using a HOGG 32-ounce bullet tumbler that I purchased from the Stainless Depot. These tumblers are pretty neat. They're essentially just a thermos. As you can see here, they have a push top lid, and they are double walled just like any stainless steel tumbler would be. The cap that goes onto the top is actually made of plastic, but you can also do something with that as well if you'd like to, but I'm not doing anything with it on this tutorial. The first thing I'm going to do is take electrical tape and tape off the top and middle of my tumbler. Now, you don't have to use electrical tape, you can use any type of painter's tape. I just find it makes it easier, especially when I'm doing the line around the middle. It seems to form a little bit easier to make that straight line around it. Whenever I'm taping something off, I always like to make a little flap so that way it's easier to find where that tape line is. I wanted something to kind of go with the cap since I'm not going to be doing anything with it, so I decided to do a stripe in the middle, which is completely optional. Everything I'm doing here is completely optional. It's just ideas for you guys. If you want to do the whole thing or not the whole thing, it's completely up to you. To ensure that I have a straight line around the middle, I take a marker and I place it on something flat, which I'm using my transfer tape, and I'm just rolling the tumbler around, making a nice straight line for myself. Once I'm done putting on my line, I'm going to come back through with my electrical tape and I'm going to put it right above that marking that we made. Now, when we go back through and do the paint will hide any markings that we made on the tumbler. Again, you want to make sure that you add that little tab so that way you can find the tape line when you're ready to go peel it back. Now that we have our tape applied, it is time to spray paint the tumbler. You can prep the areas that are open any way that you would like, and then we will add the paint. I'm going to be using a camo green for the bottom, and I'll be using a blue for the top. Please feel free to use any colors you would like to do this project. My tumbler is prepped, and I'm going to take my blue and spray paint the top of my tumbler. Then I will take my green and paint the bottom of my tumbler. Yes, I'm in my pajamas. I only have time to do my tutorials either super early in the morning or after the kids go to bed, so I'm always in my pajamas. I'm gonna let that paint cure for at least 24 hours before I apply my vinyls. Now, as you can see here, my Cricut already comes with shapes, so I'm going to take a star shape. I'm going to make it a little bigger than 1.5 inches, and I'm just going to duplicate that, get that cut out, and we will apply it to the top of our tumbler. Because we are going to be hydro dipping, these stars don't have to be perfect. There's no reason to beat yourself up over perfect spacing of these stars. Just do the best job that you can do, because the hydro dip's going to cover most of it. All I did was start at the top and make my way around that tumbler, and then every row that I did, I just offset it from that top row of stars. Handmade is just that. You are making these items by hand for your customers, and your customers love them no matter how they are, because they know how much time and effort you put into each one of your tumblers. So we are our own worst critic when it comes to these things, so it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Some of my stars went over onto my tape, so I just used that line as a guide to cut where my stars needed to be trimmed up. Now that that's all done, I'm going to come through and I'm actually going to pull that tape. And the reason why I pull my tape off is so that way I can clean up any areas that might have gotten paint on it or weren't straight. So this is your time to kind of come through and make sure everything is as good as it's going to get. Now this is beautiful just as is. I mean, that's nice too. But we're gonna keep on moving forward, and I'm gonna keep showing you more steps, but you could stop here. I mean, it's totally up to you. Now that everything's all cleaned up, I'm gonna come back through and reapply my tape right above my green. This time, instead of electrical tape, I'm gonna use a painter's tape. It's not as harsh as the electrical tape because I don't wanna pull up any of that blue that we just did. Now, on to the part where we need to apply it to our turner. I'm using this non-skid cupboard liner that I purchased from Walmart. I'll make sure to put it in the description below. I'm going to take a nice chunk of that liner and I'm going to cut it off and I'm going to roll it around my wand. Now, because this tumbler is so big, it's 32 ounces, you need to make sure that your wand is long enough to reach all the way to the bottom of your tumbler. My husband actually had to customize a wand for me to be able to reach all the way to the bottom of that tumbler, because that's the key. You need that support to be able to hold this tumbler up on your turner. You also want to make sure that you have enough of this cupboard lining paper to really shove in there. You need a lot of it. It needs that support to be able to hold up on your turner. Once you start applying those coats of epoxy, this thing gets heavy, so you really need to make sure that it's going to stay nice and stable. So I just have that all ready to go, and I am ready to mix up my epoxy. I use Alumilite's Amazing Clear Cast, but please feel free to use any epoxy you enjoy using. This is just what I use. You want to let that epoxy sit for at least 10 minutes. You want it nice and thick before applying it to the bottom. Now onto this fun new product that I found. I found it at the Lowe's, and they probably have it at Home Depot too, but it's decorative color chips, and it's essentially just paint chips, and it's what they use to coat the garage floors once they paint them. But I thought this was just a fun way to kind of give that camo color to the bottom of my tumbler. This tumbler is for my dad, and he is super into motorcycles and he is into hunting. So I thought this combination would be just great for him. So I really hope he enjoys it too this Father's Day. Now that my epoxy is nice and warm, I'm ready to apply it to the bottom of my tumbler, because we will be applying those paint chips first. And then once that is cured, we will come back through and do a second coat, fully coating the entire tumbler. Once I have my epoxy applied, I'm just gonna kind of twirl it around in my hand a couple times until everything kind of settles, and then we'll be ready to add those paint chips. Now that the epoxy has settled a bit, I'm gonna take my paint chips and I'm gonna just give a good helping of that around my tumbler. Now you can do as much or as little as you'd like. Again, these are just ideas. You could fully do a tumbler in this as well. It's completely up to you. But once I have those chips on, I just kind of like to come through and make sure that everything is pushed back from around those corners, because these things are a little bit stiff and you can actually kind of crumble them as well. They crumble very easily, so that way they can form a little bit better to the curves of the tumbler. I'm just going to continue to apply this around my tumbler, but when I come up to my tape line, because that's where we stopped with our epoxy, I'm going to make sure that I don't do too much around the tape line, and if I do, I make sure to push it back off of the tape line, because we kind of want that open where we want the brass to be showing through. Again, I'm just going to come through and I'm going to tap down anything that is poking up. I'm going to tap down around those corners to make sure there is no big paint chips around those corners. I'm going to set a timer for about 45 minutes, and then when that 45 minutes is up, I'm going to come back through and pull my tape, and then I'm going to let that finish curing for about 24 hours, and then we'll be ready to add that full coat of epoxy to the entire tumbler. Now that that is done curing, we are ready to apply our next coat of epoxy. The first thing I'm going to do is take my electrical tape and I'm going to block off the rim of my tumbler. Again, make sure you make that little flap so that way you can pull it easily when it's time to pull it off. My My epoxy is all mixed up and we are ready to completely coat our tumbler now with our epoxy. When rubbing your epoxy onto your tumbler, you want to make sure that you get all those crevices, the bottom, the top. Don't be afraid to come up a little bit onto the tape that we even used on the top, because once we go to pull it, it will pull away and it will leave a nice crisp line. Once you are done doing this, set that timer for 45 minutes, come back through, pull that tape, and let it continue curing overnight. Now we are ready to move on to the Hydro Dip. I don't want the rim painted, so I'm going to block that off. And then where I'm going to place the other piece of tape is right where the blue and the brass meet, because I just want that top portion to look like a flag. So I'm just going to put that tape right around the center where that meets up. Now that I have my tape all in place, I'm ready to move on to the next step. I will be using a gloss red and a gloss white spray paint. You want to use gloss so that way they move easily across your tumbler. I am outside and I have my bucket with water, and I'm just going to take my white and my red and I'm just going to interchange these colors, spraying one inside of another. If you don't want to use spray paint, you could also use marabou inks. They work just as well. Now I'm going to take my tumbler and I just want the top half Hydro Dip, so I'm going to hold on to the bottom half. I'm going to twist it and I'm just going to continue to twist into my water and then bring it back up. Now I didn't really like the way my Hydro Dip looked the first time, so I'm going to actually repeat the process and do a double layer of this Hydro Dip over my tumbler. There's no reason why you can't do this. So I'm going to take my tumbler, again twist it into my water, and I like the way that came out this time. I'm going to take my tape off right away so that way the line stays nice and crisp, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next part of this. I'm just going to let my Hydro Dip cure for about 30 minutes to an hour. Then I'm going to take it inside and I'm going to take 100% acetone, and I'm just going to remove some of the areas that I don't want on the top half of my tumbler. I'm just going to kind of go with the flow that the Hydro Dip did and just kind of wipe away what I think needs to be wiped away. And I want to make sure that I come back through and kind of touch that up and make sure there's no paint residue left over after I do this. Once I have the top portion the way that I want, I'm going to come through and do the personalization on the bottom of my tumbler. I am using Any Mail for the font, and I got that off of defont.com. So I will just get that sized up and I will get that cut out on my Cricut, and we'll be ready to apply that to the bottom. After I have my personalization put on, I will be ready to apply another coat or two of epoxy. Whether you try to recreate this tumbler as it is, or you take bits and pieces to create something that is your own, I hope you had fun watching this tutorial today. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any more tutorials I have coming your way, and I will see you guys next time.